Okay, so we're working on 9.5 SohCahToa. And so since somebody asked me to do the meaning of this word, I've heard from somebody else that, in the Choctaw language, that SohCahToa means triangle. That's what someone told me one time. It's probably a lie, because what it actually is a mnemonic device. Okay, and so part of it, part of the mnemonic device already, and so I'll talk to you about the end, because that's why I capitalize these letters, right? So part of the mnemonic device would be tangent equals opposite over adjacent. That's what the Toa is. So we're going to learn about the So and the Ka. Okay? And so if you've ever played that particular Skyrim game, I can't unhear yelling this very, very loudly. Of course, I'm old, and so, yeah. So here we go. So these are the two words we're going to learn. And I'm going to spell them out because you're never going to see them spelled out, ever. And I'll show you why you won't ever see them spelled out. So we're going to do sine, that is pronounced sine. And this is pronounced cosine. And these are hard to spell. If I said spell sine, no one's going to spell sine this way until I introduce it. And once I introduced it, it's not really hard to spell. All right, so sine and cosine are what we're interested in, and this will be the sine and this will be cosine. I betcha that you guys can tell me now what the ratio of sine is going to be based on this. Sine is going to, say it, opposite over hypotenuse. And cosine is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay. So what I'm going to tell you is I can't unlearn this. When I learned this in high school, we had to memorize this. SohCahToa, it was just preached to us. The reason why is because when you get to your ACT or your college entrance test, they don't tell you which one to use. So you need to memorize this, and it's a very useful tool for this chapter. It's going to be a super useful tool for both your ACT and for your Algebra 3 honors. Okay? So it's just a mnemonic device. It doesn't mean anything, but since you ask, there we go. So we're going to learn how to use these two things to do some things. So let's look at ratios. I'm going to draw a little triangle here. I'm going to call this A, this a B, and this a C. And I'll give you some numbers. 65, 16, and 63. So I want to know the ratio of sine A, and I want to know the ratio of cosine A. Okay, are we going to do the same thing we did for tangent? Are we going to go, this is opposite, this is adjacent, this is hypotenuse. And you can do that, or some people do this. But just labeling it right off the bat helps you with these things. So then you think SohCahToa. And if you have a hard time or mnemonic devices don't work for you, what my tactic to do on the chapter test is I'm going to study right before SohCahToa, SohCahToa. Right when I get the test, I'm going to write on the top of the page, SohCahToa. That way I have it written down. Because especially these two are hard to kind of keep track of. Okay? And if you aren't looking at a calculator, I got to focus here. they kind of live together, don't they? Okay, and they go in that order, sine, cosine, tangent. And so they only spell it with 3 words, so some people say sin, cos, and tan. So just know that it means sine, cosine, and tangent. But they live right here, and I bet you, in algebra, you're always wondering why you have these silly words here, right? Well, now you know. It's trigonometry. They're probably not English words. Okay, so now that I did all that talking, let's look at here. Sine is, I got to refocus. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. 16 over 65. 16 divided by 65 is going to be 0.2462. And cosine is it's adjacent over hypotenuse, right? And it is going to be 63 divided by 65. And that's going to be 0.9692. You can't see it, but you can imagine what it would be like if you could. All right, are we getting those answers? Okay. So sine and cosine, they kind of go together. And I wish I could teach you all the stuff, but you're going to have to save some for Algebra 3, because all of these cosine, sine, and tangent, they all go together in some way, shape, or form. But for our purposes, we're gonna stop at a certain level, and that's just understanding these 3, because that's where we are. But sine and cosine definitely have the same word in them, and so they're related. And so I got a couple formulas for you. Sine A is going to equal cosine 90 minus A, which also happens to equal cosine B. All right, cosine A, and I'm just going to give you 2 formulas, is going to equal sine, which is also going to equal sine B. They're kind of opposites, but in a triangle, there's 3 angles, and so the acute angles are kind of opposites, sort of. They're going to both add up to be 90 degrees. And so when we're talking about the ratios, they're kind of opposites in this shape. Basically, they're 90 degrees kind of apart. So you can basically add, I'm not going to get into too confusing. So that's what it's going to be. I'm going to give you an example. Sine 27. What's the cosine going to be? What's the equivalent cosine going to be of sine 27? Well, the cosine is going to be 90 degrees minus 27. So the cosine would be cosine what? Those are going to equal each other. Sine 27 equals cosine 63. And what it's basically saying in this case of this triangle, basically we're going to have a 90-degree angle. This is 27 and this is 63. Okay. So what we need to know on this is, I'm just going to have you do this exact thing in the homework, convert sine to cosine. Okay. So don't overthink this. Once you do get to the trigonometry, there's a lot of graphing. You do a lot more work with the different sine, cosines, tangents of the world, and it makes more sense. For our purposes, just know you can convert sine to cosine with this formula. Okay, moving on to the last. Oh, no, there's 2 things. Okay. There's 2 things here. And the two things that I need to do here are, let's do a little triangle here. And I'm going to give you an angle. I'm going to call this one 65. I'm going to call this one 8. And I want to know what x is and what y is. That's what I want to know. So that's 65 degrees. And so I want to know what x is and y is. And like I said, this is not a very pretty 8, but let's pretend that it is a prettier 8. It's still ugly. Oh, we're just going to accept that. Okay, well, from this angle, first of all, I know that this is opposite, and this is adjacent, and this is hypotenuse. So I bet I need the sine and the cosine to come up with these two things. So let's look at x, because x comes before y. X is an A. So which one am I going to use, cosine or sine? Cosine. Cosine of 8, cosine of 65 is going to equal, that's ca, so ca is CAH, so that would be x over 8. Okay? So remember, it's just that cross multiplication, so we get x equals 8 times cosine 65, and that will give us our answer. And it's basically one step in a calculator. Okay, what do we get? And again, if you're doing this in your head, you're doing it wrong, because you have to memorize a lot of stuff here, which I don't have memorized, nor will I, because... Okay, so I'm getting 3.38. Well, when we're doing this, we're usually going to round to one decimal place, so I'm going to get 3.4. Is that what we're getting? Is that right? All right, how are we going to find y? Well, y is opposite, and I still have this 8 here, so I'm probably going to use sine for y, because sine is opposite over hypotenuse, and so that's going to be y equals, sine 65 equals y over 8. So basically it's the same thing, but with a different ratio. So we're just going to put in y equals 8 times sine 65. So the different ratio that basically is different from cosine, because basically it's cosine and sine basically switch the angle that it's working with. Okay, that's basically what it's doing, but we just focus here and use the cosine and sine. 8 times sine over 65. And what do we get? Y equals 7.3. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's that. The last thing we need to do is some definitions. So we got a little dude up here with some skis. Okay. And he's going to go down a hill. Okay. Oh, boy, I got to show you this, don't I? Okay. We got a little angle here. I'll call it 21 degrees. And I didn't mention that he's not a very happy skier. And so he's standing up at the top of the hill, and he's very sad. And so we're going to call this the angle of depression.
I like that.
Okay.
That's a good name.
It's a good name. I didn't make it up. It's the truth. And there's a guy, and now we know why he's sad. There's a guy at the bottom of the hill, and he's making fun of the guy at the top of the hill. Very rude. But this one doesn't have a punchline to the joke because it's not called the angle of something entertaining. It is called the angle of elevation. Angle. Okay, and so this is just something that we use in real life. Angle of depression, angle of elevation. And so basically this guy is looking up, and that's the angle of elevation. This guy's looking down, that's the angle of depression. Okay, this is how we can use things in real life. And I don't think I did this trick for you guys in class, but, well, we'll do something else with it. But I'm going to cut this off because the video is too long already, and I'm going to let you know what you're going to do for your work. Hopefully we got time to do stuff.